Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grow With Us. My name is Evan Barton, and I'm your host who helps create conversations with the movers and shakers of a growing tech center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Grow With Us is a podcast that highlights the work in Tulsa and informs you about the exciting and innovative work being done around the city by its best and brightest. In Tulsa's mission is to connect talented individuals and companies to stimulate economic growth in Tulsa and to create more prosperous communities across the region. Each episode, Grow With Us discusses the growth of opportunities, the growth of communities striving for change, or the tech and innovation that is changing the landscape of Tulsa. This week, we're in conversation with Dr. Latta, the Executive Director of the Tulsa Higher Education Consortium. Welcome, Dr. Latta. It's so great to have you on.
Thank you so much, Evan. It's so good to be here.
I'm really excited for this conversation. Laura and I met a couple of weeks ago when she was giving a talk to our team kind of about what your organization does. And I just reached out and I was like, this is someone I have to talk to solo and with a mic in front of you.
Oh, thank you so much. And I so enjoy your show.
Thank you.
Can't say enough good about it.
Thank you. We have almost been at it for a year, which is crazy.
Wow. Congrats.
Isn't that, Jesse made a crazy face. I was like, yeah, July is when we released our first episode. So we're in June now for the time warp podcasters, if anybody likes to keep track of that. But we're almost at a year. So our 1 year special episode coming up soon. Stay tuned.
Hey, congratulations.
Thank you. It's crazy to think about. It's crazy to think about anything being a year old.
Yeah.
So Dr. Latta, let's talk about, we have lots of things we're going to talk about today. I'm really excited for this conversation, but let's get to know you a little bit. Do you mind telling us your story in really whatever way you feel comfortable?
Sure. Absolutely. Well, I have grown up in Tulsa for my entire life. I like to joke, but I'm actually very serious that I've grown up, worked, gone to school in the same 5 square miles for my entire life. I have traveled, but I have grown up and have fallen in love with Tulsa as a student, as a professional, as a teacher, and the various identities that I hold. I have 4 siblings. 3 of them also grew up in Tulsa, and we each had very different trajectories and experiences, but 3 of the 4 of us are still in Tulsa or have returned to Tulsa after leaving. Yeah.
That's so fun. I mean, at least you have your family. Like That's not even at least, but it's so fun to have your family sometimes. Like,
yes.
Especially hopefully you all get along.
Yes, we do get along.
That's awesome.
Happy to report we do get along. But so really as I was reflecting on my own story over the past few weeks, education has been a thread that's run through all of it.
Mm.
So I've been really fortunate to, like I said, I went to early childhood. I went to daycare. My mom was a single mom and was in daycare, early childhood education, elementary, high school, college, and graduate programs, all in Tulsa. So I've truly seen and am kind of a walking testimony of the fact that, a success story of education in Tulsa. And I'm thrilled now to be working in higher education as the executive director of the Tulsa Higher Education Consortium. And then I'm also a professor of education. I started my career as a teacher, and I taught 4th grade, kindergarten, and 1st grade in Union Public Schools. And what shaped that journey so much for me was my own experiences with teachers and the profound impact that they'd had on my life. And I fell in love with education. I wanted to figure out this big system that what I had heard about being a teacher and being in the education system was that it was underfunded, and I didn't understand, what does that mean? What are the implications of that? And then when I became a teacher, I fell in love with the dynamics of teaching students and seeing those aha moments where they learn something new and their lives are impacted the way that mine was. And then in sort of that journey to find out more about education in general, I started my master's at OU Tulsa. And that was where I really learned about how to think critically about some of our systems and things like maybe inequities in education and different dynamics in the education systems that we have in our nation and in our state. And then that love of trying to figure out education continued as I got my doctorate in instructional leadership. And I'm still trying to figure out the puzzle.
I was gonna say, I know that's kind of, I think it sounds like that's what you're sharing. The sentiment is that it's so fun to continue to solve not the same problem, but like different versions of the same problem, and the impact of solving that problem is going to be huge. Education is such a fun puzzle to kind of dive in and see where you can make an impact. So I totally resonate with that.
Yeah, it's complex. And you know what's interesting about this journey that we call life? At different moments, you have a different vantage point into
hmm
it, as a student or teacher or a parent of a child who's a student in the education system. So having those different identities along the way has shaped my perspective and my story in Tulsa. But I am a
Yeah.
proud Tulsan. I love Tulsa, and I am just so excited for all of the incredible things that are happening in Tulsa right
Yeah.
now. So,
That's awesome. No, I think one of the things you just talked about that I wanted to touch on it too is like the vantage point of your perspective in education is so right on. Because if you think about like every year of us as you're, I guess, aging up in the school system, you think about things differently. You're able to process things differently. I mean, I feel like I had a weird moment in my like self realization or whatever when I was 8 years old because I had moved schools and I was like, oh, this is the first time like moving schools like made a big impact on me. And there are some kids that don't go to the same school for like every year they change. Like just like that little example, and then changing middle schools and then having to apply to a high school is like all of those different things like made me think about how the system plays. And it's so interesting, like then going to college where you meet literally someone from every different type of school system. It's so not a universal experience, but it is in a weird
mhm,
way. I
mhm.
have a lot of thoughts about education, and I will definitely digress. So I'll try to keep us on task, but I'm very passionate about this, and so we could talk forever, which
Yeah.
is fun.
Yeah, I agree. I could too.
Kind of kind of building off your last point about Tulsa, I would love to hear more about like what your relationship with the city has been like over time. I know you've mentioned that you're definitely integrated and well connected with the city, but kind of talk about how the relationship has ebbed and flowed over the past couple of years.
Yeah. So largely my experience has been enormously positive. Although having grown up in Tulsa, there are definitely moments where I didn't fully appreciate the city that I was a part of. Also, it's been interesting to see Tulsa grow and evolve over time. When I was a kid, gosh, I must have been like 5 or 6, and
hmm
my dad taking me to the building where there was a ice skating rink. Uh, and so I have a storied history here in Tulsa that really actually began before me. So my grandparents moved here from Tennessee with the attract my grandfather had gotten a job at Oral Roberts University. And so there was a big spiritual sort of draw for my family to come to the city.
hmm
And that was at ORU's founding. And, you know, my both of my parents met at ORU, and then it was sort of like a legacy thing. I also also went to ORU, and that's where I got my undergrad education degree. And there have been moments in my Tulsa experience, like I said, where I just really didn't see all that Tulsa had to offer because I
mm
was looking at a very narrow slice of my experience. But
Yeah.
now that an adult and I'm a professional and I'm working, I've studied and am really getting engaged with some of the incredible initiatives and organizations that are popping up all over Tulsa. I just feel so enormously grateful. I also feel grateful for that history that I've
Yeah.
had to really appreciate where Tulsa's been and where it's headed. And I would say, you know, in the last 10 years, there's just been an incredible boom of innovation, new ideas, And it's just exciting to be a Tulsan.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with kind of those memories of a place before it looked like what it does now. Like, and I think Tulsa, I have a specific, or I don't know if I have a specific Tulsa example, but I feel that way with Tulsa too. Of like when I first moved here, granted, I was like 10.
Mhm.
What do I remember from my childhood? That's a whole nother podcast. That's a whole therapy session. But I do feel like you're just, it kind of goes back to maybe what I was saying earlier, of just like you're able to perceive things differently. You're able to interact with the city more. Like a lot of my memories of being a child was like walking to and from school because that was like something I got to do as my like independent activity. And I was the only one that went to my elementary school in my family. So like, and it was walking distance. So
Mhm.
I don't know, like, so I like know this like weird back alley, or not back alley, but like this like park entrance through that I would go through and then take a pedestrian bridge to cross Harvard and then walk into the neighborhood where my school is. That pedestrian bridge is not there anymore. So thinking like when I
Oh.
drive by it, I'm like, they don't want people walking anymore. What does that mean? Like I literally go down the paths
Mm.
of like thinking about things that affect, well, obviously like that experience is like something that affected me because I did it all the time. But it's just interesting to take little moments and see how, if you return to, I guess, your snapshot of what that memory was like. Like that can't exist anymore unless I can walk across Harvard in the air. I will not be like that. Like I won't be able to emulate that experience anymore.
Well, okay, the point being that there are lots of different places in Tulsa that I have memories from different points in my life, whether that was as a young child and a lot of nostalgic times, but then also as somebody who was learning who their identity was as an adolescent, and then somebody who was going to college and that interesting life phase where you're sort of discovering yourself and your future. And now I'm a mom and I have a toddler who I take to the same park that I played at when I was his age. Yeah. Yeah.
And something that I've been personally going on kind of a journey that Tulsa is a main character, and I would say is like understanding where your community is, or and really where you belong. So, and I this is something I talked about in a therapy session the other day. Was about like belonging in Tulsa. It's interesting to me that I feel like two simultaneous facts can exist for me. I feel like I belong in Tulsa, but Tulsa is like a very wide, I mean it's a big city. It's a city.
Mhm.
So feeling like I belong here is like saying I belong in Oklahoma, which is like a whole state, you know. It's like
Mhm.
I don't necessarily know where I fit in or belong in as we zoom in more. And so that's like something that I love hearing people's answers to kind of like what communities and what, where did you feel like you belong type of thing. And so I guess the official question that I would love to hear your kind of thoughts on is how have specific communities in Tulsa impacted you both personally and professionally? Because I think that it's fair to say for you that probably both are the case.
Mhm. Yeah, so I mentioned that kind of a common thread through my life's journey is education, but specifically, the role that teachers played in shaping my life. And I had so many wonderful teachers through elementary school and beyond, middle school and high school. And I felt such a sense of belonging in the schools that I attended.
Mhm.
And I, when it was time for me to make a decision about my future, my initial reaction was, well, I'm going to be a nurse because I heard that nurses make a lot of money. And I think I didn't have a lot of support
Yeah.
or advising, but I was like, I'm going to start it as nursing, as a nurse.
Yeah.
And I have an enormous amount of respect for my friends and colleagues who are nurses, but I learned quickly that that wasn't actually the trajectory that I was going to be on. I think I had my
Mm.
first class and blood kind of makes me a little squeamish. So I
Yeah.
learned pretty quickly on that that wasn't the right path. But I realized after I changed my major probably 3 or 4 times that it was education and the teachers who made such a powerful impact on my life
Mhm.
that I wanted to go back to and I wanted to be a part of and to continue to be a part of schools that were shaping the lives and the trajectories of students. And so I would say the education community has been really formative. So I said, I mentioned I taught for 5 years, and it was the most wonderful, rewarding, but also the hardest, most difficult, most involved job that I've ever had.
Yes.
And I was that statistic that I was the person who taught for 5 years, and then I had to leave the classroom because it was such a hard, emotionally, physically, mentally, in every capacity, such a hard job.
Yeah.
And so I moved into community school coordinating, and that's where I started learning about the intersection of business and industry and education, and how powerful it can be when businesses and organizations partner with schools and empower, whether that's by showing up, physical presence, or financial support, can really help schools to grow and to thrive. And I actually studied that for my dissertation. I looked at how partnerships with out of school time organizations help students develop 21st century skills and attitudes toward STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math. And I just kept following this path down the intersection at that intersection of business and education. And there's really fruitful opportunity, I believe, whenever we look at how, some innovative ways that education, whether that's K-12 or higher ed, and business and industry can intersect even before a student graduates from high school or college.
100%. Oh, I like thinking about that makes me excited because I don't always go back to this, but something I go back to is just that like something we talked about at the very beginning, like schools are underfunded.
Mhm.
Guess who isn't underfunded? Businesses. Like literally, it sounds like a match made in heaven. Even though I think it is important to encourage. I mean, my kind of complex anti-capitalism like brain is also thinking like businesses shouldn't be in school, so we can learn to think critically about them as a system, just as we would want to be critical of education as a system. But I digress from that point. I do think that it is an amazing opportunity, kind of like you're saying, because it gives kids access to stuff. It like, and stuff being things that can be career paths, stuff being things that like could help with spark any interest. Like
Mhm.
I just think that it's such a valid hopefully partnership that we need more of it, and I want our schools to get it. There's a lot of things that stand in the way of it. I'm presuming, and I'm sure you found out from your research that maybe there's someone out there, some organization that doesn't want businesses in schools because it does X, Y, or Z. Like it feels, and that could be politics. Who knows? It's just interesting to kind of interrogate that, like kind of
Yeah.
why I think the schools are a great example of taking something and being like, why isn't this the answer? And then peeling back the curtain and finding out that there's a lot of reasons why. And sometimes
Yeah.
those reasons are noble or not so noble.
Yeah. You know, that makes me think about the partnership that we had, and just presence and exposure to possibility. And I don't know who used this quote the first time, but there's that quote, you can't be what you can't see.
Mm,
And so kids and students and adult learners who have experience and exposure with what the possibilities are for their futures, in my mind, is an immensely positive thing.
yeah.
So we had at the school where I was working as community school coordinator, there was a business that provided funding for out of school time programs. And students were able to participate in things like, you know, computer coding. And the employees of that business came and helped teach
Yeah.
some of those coding programs. And so that was just the coolest thing to see students making a connection to a real life person who has a real life job doing this real life, really cool thing
Yeah.
that they're engaged in. So there are some very cool practical ways that synergy of education and business can really happen.
Yeah, okay, I just thought of a specific example that I can tell you about, and it's honestly a hilarious story. We did, in elementary school, we went to BizTown for,
Mhm.
I think Junior Achievement is the sponsoring
Mhm.
organization for that. And think about me now, and then think about me as a 9-year-old. They're not that much different. I'm just a little more sure of myself now. And all of the teacher, I like, they gave you a list of the jobs that you wanted to do. You could work like with Cox Media Company and doing media production. There's obviously like firemen, and they kind of do kid stuff and then also like actual business things. And I saw like news reporter, and those are the people that I see on TV all the time. It's like, oh, of course I want to be a news reporter.
Oh,
Come on.
yeah.
And I was like, I have the perfect personality for a news reporter. I love to talk. That was my
Yes.
qualification as like a 9-year-old. And I remember the day like they posted the jobs for when we were going to go next week. And I went and looked, and I saw my name, and then I looked to the left and it said CEO of Cox. And I was like, literally started crying. I was like, no, I don't want to be the CEO. I want to be the news reporter. Like literally went to my mom and cried. And I think that I had to have a conversation with the teacher, and they were like, you know that that's like the boss, right? And I was like, no. Of course I didn't know what a CEO meant, but like it was just I don't know necessarily what there's a lot of things we could extrapolate from that.
Unless
Um,
there's a teleprompter, my heart's not in it.
exactly. Put me in front of a camera. That's what I wanted. I knew it from the jump, and someone should have listened to me. Not necessarily. But I think it is the reason why I find that story funny, and it's actually a memory that I remember pretty well, is because I do think that that experience as a whole was actually really cool and validating in a lot of ways. Like
Yeah.
if we had got to go to Jittown like every month or so, like maybe that might have been overkill, but we would have been exposed exactly like you're
Mhm.
talking about. I felt like that's the reason that experience was so cool is because it was like, oh, this is our only thing we're gonna get to do for the semester.
Yeah, and it was really special. But you know what? I love that story so much because look at you now. You are hosting a podcast that's an incredible podcast, and that requires a lot of I mean, that job didn't probably exist back when you were 9, but look at you
Yeah,
now.
look at me now. I
You've
mean,
arrived.
and I am interested in media too in a
Yes.
way. Like it's weird, like not that being my first aptitude test I ever took was like the questionnaire that to help place you in your job. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of things to go from that experience, and I think it was really fun as a kid to
Yeah.
experience, but also like reflecting back on kind of what the actual design behind it was.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to think about, is a 9-year-old kid gonna kinda get what we're doing here? Like, us
Mhm.
adults can be in a room strategizing, thinking about, this is gonna mean this for this child, and then it might just be a funny story. It might just be, like, something they did in class that week,
Yeah.
or it could have that long-lasting impact, and that's kind of the cool, I guess, potentials of being in the classroom, being in education, is that you don't know what's gonna stick with kids.
And I think we underestimate the capacity of
100%,
kids. I
100%.
truly hope that right now there's a 9-year-old who's maybe riding in the car with a parent and hearing this right now and feeling inspired to
Eh,
become a podcast
yes.
host. But
Oh,
you're
yeah.
you're absolutely right. I mean, our kids, our students, our, high school, college students, adult learners, they're the future. And I think we would be doing ourselves a huge disservice to underestimate how powerful they are and
Yeah.
how important those early experiences and exposures are.
100%. And I think this tees up great, like our next kind of conversation about what the consortium does. And I say I want to just highlight how amazing this acronym is, the consortium. It's perfect because it stands for Tulsa Higher Education Consortium. It's perfect. I love it. It's full stamp of approval from me. But Dr. Lotta, tell us about it.
Thank you so much. Well, the Tulsa Higher Education Consortium is sort of a what and a who. So we'll start with the who. So the consortium is the 7 Tulsa higher education institutions, including Langston University, Northeastern State University, OSU Tulsa, OU Tulsa, Rogers State University, TCC, and TU.
You got them all 7. I love it.
All 7 and in alphabetical order in my mind. And the consortium exists. So it serves as an entity that helps those 7 institutions work together, share research, share information, and ultimately support the higher ed experiences of students in the Tulsa area. So if you look at the Tulsa higher education ecosystem, I mean, gosh, it is so rich and vibrant. Langston University is the only HBCU in the state of Oklahoma. NSU and RSU are 2 regional institutions. OSU Tulsa, OU Tulsa, 2 research institutions. TCC, the largest community college in the state. And then the University of Tulsa is a private institution. So if a student in Tulsa has ambitions of going to a college or university, they have such an incredible list of options to choose from. And those are just the 7 in the consortium. And those 7 have been working together since 2017, 2018 to create seamless degrees, degree pathways for students who want to start their degree at TCC and then transfer to a receiving institution. So the way that it kind of works is that Tulsa Community College offers the lower division coursework, and then the 5 other institutions offer the upper division. Actually, all 6 of them do. And then TU is the private institution, so students can go to TU for all 4 years. But if a student wants to get a degree at a public institution, they do start at TCC and then they transfer to one of those 6 other institutions. So the institutions are working so hard to create these seamless degrees where students can, start at TCC, transfer, and they don't lose any credit upon transfer.
That's awesome.
Which is enormously helpful, especially considering that Tulsa Achieves is a program that empowers students to get an associate's degree cost-free. And that's for Tulsa residents who have graduated from a Tulsa high school. That program started, I think it started when I was in high school, and I actually took some classes at TCC. And I remember being blown away that I could go and get a degree for free, an associate's degree for free. And it's true.
Yeah. No, that's so awesome. My mom works at Tulsa Technology Center, and she's been a high school counselor, senior. She worked predominantly with senior class, so she's very familiar with Tulsa Achieves, and we talk, like have dinner conversation about like how cool it is that that's an offering of the city, because it's something that really helps a lot of students in this area. I mean, just from non-traditional students to people that don't necessarily need to go to a 4-year institution out of state to get that. The education is, I'm not going to say they're the same, but I will say that they are definitely, it's an option, and it's a good option because there's high quality education to be had here at these institutions. And it's awesome that there's so many, the pathways that you're talking about, that seamless pathway of 2 years, and then that's 2 years of your life. I know 18 and 19 feel like the longest, most important 2 years of your life. And I think a lot of people would say that, but it's 2 years to get a cost-free education, which is really awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Too many people I know have been like, I wish I would have done Tulsa Achieves.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, if I could erase 2 years of student debt from
Yeah.
I didn't do Tulsa Achieves fully, but I was a concurrent student in high school, and I took concurrent classes. And even that was an enormous, was able to save money while working toward my degree and taking high school classes. And I know, Tulsa Community College is expanding those programs through the EDGE programs, earn a degree, graduate early programs. So some really innovative things are happening. But really back, in 2017, 2018, so you may have read about the Tulsa Transfer Project. And that's what the consortium really started as, was this initial work to create these seamless degrees where the 7 institutions came together and they did some really deep reflective work to see how their systems and structures were supporting students who wanted to transfer and seeing what was working well and what wasn't working so well and was an
Mhm.
opportunity for change. And through that process, they built really strong relationships, and some incredible partnerships have emerged with all 7 of those institutions. And what's really interesting too is when you look at other cities that have similar ecosystems to Tulsa, higher ed ecosystems, that is, many of them have higher ed consortia. So the Tulsa Higher Ed Consortium is the only one of its kind in the state of
Mm.
Oklahoma, but there are about 65 others across the nation. And so we are part of a network of more consortia and learn from other innovative cities that are doing great work.
That's awesome. It's so great to have a network and partners that are doing similar work in other areas to achieve the same goal.
Mhm.
And I really liked what you said about like TCC being a very innovative institution because I think that that's right on the money with just a lot of their degree pathways, the Tulsa Chiefs program, obviously, and then they're a ecosystem partner of ours, kind of working on some really awesome stuff that I think is really going to serve Tulsans, especially Tulsans that are interested in technology too. So we're really big fans of
Yeah.
that, and it's great to hear that that work kind of blossomed from just a project or just an idea or maybe just people sitting in a room, and now it's like it's a lot of moving parts. It's, that's really serving the community, which is awesome.
Yeah. As an organization, we serve our 7 institutions as we call it the 3 Cs, a convener, so bringing them together, breaking down some silos that traditionally exist between institutions, sharing research, sharing ideas, sharing best practices, and then, sharing information for
Mhm.
transfer. And then we're also a communicator, so sharing out the good work. There's a lot happening in higher ed in our city, and
Yeah.
it's so exciting to be able to share out all of the things that each of the 7 institutions are working on or have on the horizon, new programs, new institutes, things like that. And then we serve as a connector, connecting higher ed with the city, with business and industry, through our affiliate members, the Tulsa Regional Chamber and the Broken Arrow Chamber. So really, we're in the business of, I think I said earlier, breaking down silos, but really opening up lines of communication and space to collaborate that haven't existed historically.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I think that really what that allows is for you to have a great understanding, hopefully through the collaboration and the partnership of what Tulsans need or what Tulsans want, and I think that kind of, um, I'm keep building in these segues, but I definitely want that to be kind of something we talk about here with, um, kind of understanding the student populations and definitely the connections that you make at at these institutions. I'm sure that there have been glaring issues, I guess maybe is the right word, in education. And I would love to kind of hear which one shocks you the most. Yeah, just I'm very curious, like kind of what stat shocks you or urges immediate action or kind of you don't necessarily have to reveal any strategy of your organization, but more like just maybe even I don't know. Now I'm overqualifying. I would love
Yeah.
your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mentioned the institutions coming together back in 2017, and there was a statistic that served as the impetus for that work. And it was a national statistic put out by the National Student Clearinghouse. So, looking at students, so all of the students across the nation, about 80% of students intend to earn a bachelor's degree when they start a post secondary degree program, whether that's
Mhm.
associates or bachelor's. 25% of those students intend to transfer to a 4-year college within 5 years. So there's pretty high intention if they start at a community college. But what really served as the motivating sort of nexus of this work was that about 15 to 17% of students who transfer then earn a bachelor's degree. So I applaud and commend the 7 institutions in Tulsa for seeing that statistic, being aware of that, and then realizing, okay, we need to go to the drawing board and figure out how to align our systems so that transfer doesn't feel like such a disruption. that transfer feels truly more seamless. And students know when they finish their associates at TCC or they finish whatever coursework they're taking, who do they contact? Where do they go? What's the building? What does it look like to transfer to any of the received Langston, NSU, OSU, OU, RSU, or TU, and have a very clear map. And so if you go to our website, you can actually see this illustrated. It's pretty amazing. On our homepage, we have 3 search portals. The first is you can search for any degree in Tulsa. You want to get a degree in communications, then you can search for it and find out what institution you could go to. But then there's another one, and that's transfer pathways. And the institutions have created just shy of 150 different pathways where students can transfer without losing credit. And you can actually search for different degrees and programs and see, okay, semester by semester, what does it look like for me to get a degree in broadcast journalism in Tulsa without leaving Tulsa, without having to go to a main campus or something like that. Again, 150. And we started out back in 2017, 2018 with just above 20. So an enormous amount of growth has been made, and creating those degrees has been a lot of work, but I really applaud our institutions for working together and sort of stepping outside of the traditional dynamic that exists between higher ed, especially in the Midwest where we're all about, sports rivalries and things like that.
Yeah.
It's like competition is baked into that dynamic. The consortium kind of flies in the face of that dynamic and says, what would be possible if we collaborated?
Yeah, can we not let sports be a reason we don't support students, especially paying students, especially all of this? I totally agree with what you're saying in that. It's wild that that's baked into even the dynamic of probably the way the employees of either institution interact with each other, because it's either Boomer Sooner or Go Cowboys or whatever. And I'm like, what if I don't care? I hate to be that person, but
well, we will never make loyalties go away. Those are important. Sense of identity and belonging is really important. But, sort of operate by this phrase, competition makes us faster, but collaboration makes us better.
Ooh, I like that. That's awesome. Yeah. And sure, there's some sentiment behind what I just said, since none of those institutions are my alma mater. But I obviously have so many. I think actually 4 of my 4 parents all went to one of those schools.
Yeah.
Actually, 3 of my 4 parents are all Northeastern State graduates, which is
Wow.
cool. But I wanted to kind of return to one of the things that you said, just talking about transferring. I think that this is such an interesting angle, because the first things that came to my mind were, one, the circumstances for transferring are so different for every student. You might be transferring for a medical reason. You could be transferring for academic mismatch. And these are all things that I felt like I was encouraged to know and own. What I mean by that is, whenever I got to school, advisors, even my mom, who I look at as an advisor for educational decisions and things and obviously a lot of things, but I thought about specifically, I need to know what I want, and I need to know where I'm going to get what I want. And especially since colleges cost a lot of money, presumably, most of the time. And so it's kind of this weird dynamic, or maybe even paradox, of the institution, or you as a student need to know exactly what you want to do. But then as soon as you or come to some type of answer to that question, sometimes institutions make it so hard to leave. You're trapped either financially, or the transfer process is not easy because all of your credits are going to go away. Sorry. That's because you made a decision at the time that now you're being punished for. And I am so tired of being punished for systematic decisions. And I don't know, maybe this is a soapbox, but it just really feels like a huge win for our city that these pathways exist and someone actually cares about students, is kind of how it feels.
Yeah. When the institutions did that deep dive into their transfer cultures to see if they were a really supportive transfer culture, there were some difficult findings, realizing that there were some barriers that existed that didn't need to exist. And it was actually quite simple to to remove them. And all 7 of our institutions have transfer offices or individuals that are designated to supporting students' journeys as they're transferring. TCC has a really active and robust transfer office, and they have done so much work leading conversations about with students, with even, whoever needs to be a part of the conversation about what that transfer process looks like and how to do it as easily as possible with as few barriers in the way.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too, something that you said, Evan, that I think it needs to be considered is that when you look at the Tulsa population and you look at those individuals who are students in Tulsa, according to the census, there are 51% of students are considered traditional students. So that's between the ages of 18 and 24.
Mm-hmm.
And 49% are adult learners above the age of 24. And those two groups of individuals have very different needs, different motivations, different life circumstances. And so our institutions being able to be adaptable and supportive of whoever the student is that wants to get a degree or work toward a certification or a program, it's critical for them to be adaptable and to know who to call from a partner institution where the student may be interested in transferring. It's better for our city, it's better for our institutions, and most importantly, it's better for our students.
Yeah. I mean, I just love hearing that, mostly because I truly do get frustrated with this societal pressure or whatever that a lot of people face, that the United States of America and it is a paragon of education. Like, we are where everyone goes to get educated because it's accessible. But then higher education feels the most inaccessible sometimes. Having navigated that system myself and seen my peers, I'm a little freshly wounded, from my undergrad. It was just so disheartening to be kind of fed this is how this system is, and your doors are wide open, you can explore all these paths, blah blah blah. And then when I got there, it was not like that. And maybe that's because there was a lot of things going on with, jumping from Oklahoma to New Hampshire. There was a huge culture shock, lots of different things, and maybe my peers were feeling that as well. But like you just mentioned, the barriers that were there were so easily, like, it felt almost like it was so easy to just remove those barriers. Like, if one person knew about it, it was like, oh, okay, like, we'll just get that, and then no other student had to deal with it ever again. But that those couple that did face that barrier, they really struggled, and the identity of those students often follow a pattern, and that's what often frustrated me too, is just seeing the same types of students facing the same types of barriers and not seeing other people. Not that I want to see other people face challenges, but it's more like, where is this equality that or equity, and which I don't know. We're going down a lot of different rabbit holes, or I feel like I'm going down a lot of different rabbit holes with this, just because I'm obviously very passionate about this.
No, I think it's so important. And I think, equity is actually one of the 4 parts of our mission is equitable access and opportunity for students, and recognizing that every student is a student with an experience and intersectionality of identities that make up who they are and is going to inform how their experience looks in higher ed. And I am hopeful, having worked with our 7 institutions and have seen how there's a consideration for who students are, what they bring to the space, and how to support them on their journey, making sure that there are as few exit ramps or like easy exit ramps and paths to stay on the path toward getting a degree, and have enough supports. So I think of, I was in a meeting last week, first generation college students who have never navigated the system of higher education. It's a lot. There are there's a lot of jargon, or tends to be a lot of jargon, and it can feel really overwhelming to even just complete a FAFSA. And that's not even an application to
and that
college.
is step 1.
Yeah.
Like, it's so wild.
And so our institutions have, if you haven't heard of TRIO programming, you need to look into it because it is just phenomenal. But TCC, NSU, Langston, and our 7 institutions have these programs to help demystify that process and eliminate the barriers to access. And as the consortium, we're hoping to curate all of those resources and host them on our website so students who want to get a degree can go to one website instead of 7. And they can link out to, if there's a real interest in attending Langston, they can see what programs that they can participate in, and but can start at sort of one hub rather than feeling overwhelmed by too many options.
Yeah, rather than 15 that are all kind of different slices of the truth type of thing, which is so important. So I'm so glad that resource exists. And I think kind of to piggyback off of this conversation, I think it's important that the conversation I want to kind of talk about is the existence of higher education maybe as an institution, and at least how as it exists in the United States. There's a lot of, and something that's a little bit more timely to kind of politics and current events right now is just this concept of student debt, and or not the concept, but I guess the existence of it. And it's a really huge conversation. And so I struggle with personally the idea of how can I be a proponent of higher education while also knowing that it indebts people thousands of dollars that they never can escape from for no reason. And that's my personal opinion, that it's for no reason, because I truly don't think that the cost of education should come at $80,000 a year. Like, my God, it just sounds absolutely ridiculous. But I think I would love to kind of hear, since I've already clearly shared my thoughts on this, I would just love to hear kind of what your thoughts are on that conundrum for me. Like, how can we support higher education, which it's truly a full-time element of your job, while also recognizing the damage that it can cause post-achievement?
Mm-hmm. That is a big question to answer, and one that I am still chasing answers for. But you're right. As a person who has multiple tens of thousands of student debt, and it's something that's on the top of my mind as well, I've thought about this a lot. And I'm going to use a really education term, but what is in my locus of control? What can I do to address this problem that students are maybe graduating with thousands of dollars of debt? Obviously, the first answer is advocate for policy that would lighten the load and the financial burden for those students, because I guess graduation time just passed, and it feels like a time that is full of so much hope and possibility, and the sky's the limit, the world is your oyster, all of those phrases, whatever. But there's sort of a cloud that sometimes hangs over that I have to find a job that's going to take care of the debt that I just accrued. So I think if we take inventory of what programs exist in our city to preemptively help students think about debt and what it means to take on a student loan, the city of Tulsa and the mayor's office has the city's financial empowerment center that helps to educate individuals about, financial positions and even counseling to get out of debt. So that's one thing. Obviously, there's also Tulsa Achieves, where essentially a student can get a 4-year degree for the price of 2 if they graduate from a Tulsa high school and they are eligible for the Tulsa Achieves funding. That's just such an enormous financial burden that doesn't exist. And then also, so the consortium has a search portal on our homepage for Tulsa-specific scholarships. So students can see where they can apply for scholarships specific to Tulsa and Tulsa area. And I think a common theme in this conversation has been, getting early exposure and experience with finances. I think too, working with high school counselors already do so much. So I'm just going to note that it is a job that is enormously challenging. But as students are preparing for life outside of high school, once they graduate, I think it'd be beneficial for them to have some really good financial counseling. And I know some different programs exist, and
our state actually has a personal financial literacy requirement in high school, which I don't know when they implemented that, but I had an interesting experience in high school with that course.
That's actually it's interesting that you say that because I've heard the same comment from folks that have taken that course. I think it might have been before my time or
They
after
make
my
you,
time,
or at
but
least like on my high school, we took it freshman year, which seems like that's when it's the least applicable. And
yeah.
I find that to be an issue, but it's also like, how are you going to force a senior that's so done with high school to sit in the class where they learn about, the outcome is so needed, but the timing is off or something. That's my personal reflection on that.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good point because there's not a lot of life context to attach the concepts
Exactly.
to. Maybe investigating what programs, what curriculum exists for students before they start acquiring that debt. But for those that already have it, I mean, I think pursuing and making available accessible financial counseling, that's something that I feel like is a little more actionable.
Yeah.
It feels like a big problem that I can't quite solve, but I wanna take the steps that I can to 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 make life a little easier for those who have debt. And then also something I wanna applaud the institutions for. There are students who are just shy maybe of like 9, 13, or 9, 12 credits away from getting a degree. And having that 4-year degree may mean an income jump, like $20,000. It could
Yeah.
something, in certain professions, the difference between an associate's and a bachelor's degree makes an enormous amount of difference. And so employers who are willing to help their employees through tuition reimbursement or remission get those final credits to get the next credential could be deeply empowering for their financial situation.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think what you said lots of amazing things, and I kind of want to recap them really fast. So one this is really for me to hear too, is that, and for listeners to hear as well, is that we're not necessarily voiceless or powerless if this doesn't affect us. Or if it does affect you and you're still out of the system, you're not in a higher education degree program or anything like that, you're just impacted financially, you still don't not have a voice. There's ways to advocate for yourself and for really just this system, I guess, that we're kind of all living in. Effective and well, effective policy is what we need.
Mhm.
We need that in a lot of things, but
Yeah.
we need effective policy is one of the first things I heard. And then secondly, financial, like solid financial advice, which I think is so right on the money. Just again, kind of loops back to our first conversation about, or the beginning of the conversation about, like resources coming into the school,
Mhm.
and that feels like an area of innovation. Like, how can we had a episode a couple weeks ago with the financial advisor, Derek Alexander, who's amazing. Like, get Derek in to talk to some high schoolers. He's awesome. He would love to talk to people about that.
Mhm.
But how do we create like that program and the infrastructure to support that? Like, all of those things are really important. And then, yeah, those are the I heard all of the things that you said, but now that I'm talking, I'm getting it all mumbled in my brain. But that's what I heard, and I'm definitely gonna take that and hear it and process it and understand what that means for me, instead of just being frustrated, because that's where I tend to go with, especially this conversation, when it just seems so trivial. It seems so, yeah, like America, like everyone is suffering. Not everyone is suffering, but a lot of people are struggling in this thing that seems so actionable.
Yeah.
So,
You just did something that I think is really the key to all of it. You made some mental connections to folks that have expertise in these areas that maybe there's a need for those resources. And there's a lot of potential and opportunity, especially in Tulsa, where there's enormous amount of synergy, the work that you do in
mhm,
Tulsa, pairing those experts with the systems that need expertise.
yeah,
And so I like that.
I love it. Yeah, it's kind of related to like your dissertation in a way of too, of like getting these two institutions to, instead of exist siloed, exist together and mutualistically. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
Laura, it's been so great to have you on this episode. If any of our Grow With Us listeners want to learn more about the consortium or learn more about you, where can they find you?
Absolutely. So our website is www.tulsahighered.com. And our email address is info@tulsahighered.com. We'd love to connect.
Thank you for engaging in this conversation with me.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you so much for being on this episode of Grow With Us, Laura. For our listeners of Grow With Us, I'd like to plug a few resources that might be helpful for you. If you would like to stay in touch with all of our featured jobs and opportunities in Tulsa, then please join our talent network. You can join at talent.intulsa.com. That's talent.intulsa.com. By joining our talent network, you will get access to our newsletter where you can stay up to date with our latest career advice, featured opportunities with Tulsa partner companies, and our placement success stories. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to be notified when more episodes of Grow With Us are released. Let us know what you think about how we are doing by rating and reviewing. Huge thank you to our editors at Rant9 Production and Jesse Ulrich. This has been Grow With Us.